The turkey was still in the oven, filling the house with the scent of sage and butter, when I realized the silence was too heavy. I was in the kitchen of our small farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania, wiping flour off my apron, expecting to hear my husband, Caleb, laughing at a football game in the next room. Instead, I heard the rhythmic, rattling breath of his stepmother, Martha, coming through the baby monitor on the counter. I walked into the living room. The TV was off. The coat rack was empty. Caleb's keys, which he always tossed on the mahogany sideboard, were gone. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking. I opened our shared location app. A small blue dot was moving fast, miles away, heading toward the city. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I called again, blocked. He had blocked me. I stood in the center of the home I had spent 3 years building, realizing that my husband hadn't just gone to the store. He had evacuated. He had left me alone on Thanksgiving with a woman who didn't recognize my face and a turkey that would never be eaten. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who is part of our community. Today, you're going to hear how a woman who was left for dead decided to bury the man who abandoned her without using a single shovel. Like and subscribe to the channel. Also turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our stories. I didn't panic. I went to Martha's room. She was 82, skin like parchment, eyes clouded by the fog of her final days. Caleb had insisted she move in with us 6 months ago. "She's family, Brenda," he had told me, his voice thick with fake emotion. "We owe her this." What he meant was I owed her this. Caleb didn't change bandages. He didn't handle the midnight bouts of confusion. He worked late. He went to gym sessions. And he lived his life while I became a full-time hospice nurse for a woman who wasn't even my own blood. I looked at Martha. She reached out a frail hand, her fingers cold. "Is he coming?" she whispered. "No, Martha," I said, the words tasting like ash. "He's not coming back." I walked back to the kitchen and looked at the feast. The mashed potatoes, the cranberry sauce, the expensive wine Caleb had asked me to buy. I realized then that this wasn't a sudden flight. I opened the hall closet. His suitcases were gone. His favorite boots were gone. His high-end camera gear, the stuff he spent thousands on while I clipped coupons, was gone. He had planned this. He waited until the holiday, until I was tied to the house and the care of his mother, to make his exit. He thought I was trapped. He thought my kindness was a cage. He thought he could leave the boring parts of his life behind and start fresh with the secret bank account I had discovered 3 weeks ago but hadn't mentioned yet. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I sat down at the kitchen table, took a sip of the $80 wine, and opened my laptop. I didn't look for divorce lawyers, not yet. I looked at the deed to the house my grandfather had left specifically to me. Caleb had spent years acting like he owned the place. He had filled the garage with his project cars and the basement with his office. He thought he was the king of a castle he hadn't paid a dime for. He thought he was leaving me with the burden of his dying mother so he could go run to the city and play house with whatever girl was currently liking his Instagram photos. I looked at the blue dot on the map. He was at a hotel, a luxury one. "Enjoy the room, Caleb," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "Because by the time you come back, you won't even have a zip code." The next 3 days were a blur of shadows and silence. Martha passed away on Saturday morning. She went peacefully, holding my hand, calling me by Caleb's name. It was the ultimate irony. The woman he abandoned died thinking I was the son who couldn't be bothered to stay. After the coroner left and the house was truly empty, the silence started to scream. I stood in the doorway of the master bedroom. Caleb's side of the bed was neat, untouched. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted. He was waiting for me to break. He was waiting for the frantic "Where are you?" text so he could play the victim and say I was smothering him. I went down to the basement. This was his man cave. Thousands of dollars in electronics, a collection of vintage watches in a glass case, and a safe I knew the code to because he was too arrogant to think I'd ever look inside. I opened the safe. Inside wasn't just money. There were folders, documents. It turned out Caleb wasn't just a coward, he was a thief. He had been skimming from Martha's estate for years. He had forged her signature on her pension checks. He had been preparing for his new life by stealing from a dying woman's medicine cabinet and her bank account. I felt the physical weight of his betrayal. It felt like a stone in my stomach. Every time I had skipped a meal to afford Martha's specialized protein shakes, he was putting that money into a travel fund. Every time I cried from exhaustion, he was scouting apartments in the city. I spent the night sitting on the floor of the basement, surrounded by his things. My mind went back to our wedding day. He had promised to cherish me. He had promised in sickness and in health. I realized he meant his health and my labor. I looked at vintage watches. I looked at the $5,000 gaming computer. I looked at the project car in the garage, a 1969 Mustang he had poured every spare cent of our savings into. He loved these things more than he loved his mother. He loved them more than he loved me. That was his weakness. He didn't care about people, but he worshipped stuff. I stood up. My legs were stiff, but my heart was racing. I had a vision of the future. In his version, I was the broken ex-wife left with the funeral bills and a crumbling house. In my version, I was a storm. I didn't call a moving company. I didn't call his friends. I went to the shed and pulled out the heavy-duty industrial shredder I used for my home business. Then, I went to the garage and grabbed the toolbox. I started with the watches. One by one, I didn't smash them. I didn't do anything that looked like a scene. I simply opened the backs and removed the tiny, essential gears. I put them back in their velvet boxes, looking perfect but eternally still. Time was up for Caleb. Next was the basement. I didn't break the computer. I simply removed the solid-state drives and the processor. I took the brain out of everything he owned. But the real plan was much bigger. I knew Caleb was planning to come back on Monday to get the rest of his things. He had sent a single, cold text Sunday night. "Coming for my stuff tomorrow, don't be there. I don't want a drama." He wanted a clean break. He wanted to walk in. Take his toys and leave the mess for me to clean up. He didn't even ask about his mother. He didn't know she was gone. "Don't worry, Caleb," I said, looking at the Mustang. "There won't be any drama, just a very, very long walk." Monday morning was crisp and cold. I had been awake for 48 hours. I felt like a ghost, moving through the house with a purpose so sharp it felt like a blade. I had spent the night working. I didn't just take parts out of his things. I had contacted a local. Everything must go liquidation service. I told them I was moving to Europe in 12 hours and needed the house emptied. I showed them the deed. I showed them my ID. I told them the man who lived here had already moved his essentials and anything left was to be sold or donated immediately. By 10:00 a.m., 3 massive trucks were in my driveway. Men with dollies and straps moved through the house like a swarm of locusts. They took the man cave. They took the TV. They took the couch Caleb loved. They took the designer clothes he had left behind. But I kept the Mustang for myself. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching my life be dismantled. The neighbors stared. I didn't care. I felt lighter with every box that left the threshold. I wasn't losing my home, I was exfoliating a parasite. The liquidation lead, a man named Silas, came up to me. "You sure about the car, ma'am? I have a buyer on the phone who will give you 20 grand cash right now, even without the title in hand, just for parts." "No," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "The car has a special appointment." At 1:00 p.m., I called the local police department. I didn't report a crime. I reported a suspicious vehicle abandoned on my property. I told them my husband had left a week ago, and I had discovered he was using my garage to store items that didn't belong to him. I mentioned the forged documents I had found in the safe. The officers arrived within 20 minutes. I was the picture of the grieving, confused wife. I showed them the folders from the safe. I showed them Martha's forged signature. I showed them the new bank account statements. "He left me with his dying mother and disappeared," I told them, my voice cracking perfectly. "I think he was using this house as a base for. Well, I don't know, I'm scared." While the police were marking the evidence, I saw a familiar silver SUV turn into the long driveway. It was Caleb. He stopped the car 50 yards away. He saw the police. He saw the empty trucks leaving. He saw me standing on the porch with the officers. He didn't look like the cool, calculated man who had left on Thanksgiving. He looked like a cornered rat. He got out of the car, his face pale. "Brenda." "What is going on? Why are the cops here?" One of the officers stepped forward. "Mr. Caleb, we need to talk to you about some financial documents found on the premises and the status of Mrs. Martha's estate." Caleb's eyes darted to the garage. The door was open. The Mustang was sitting there, but it was surrounded by yellow tape. He looked at the house. Through the windows, he could see the bare walls. His sanctuary was gone. You sold my stuff," he shrieked, forgetting the police were right there. "That's my gear, those are my watches. Brenda, you crazy bee." "Watch your tone, sir," the officer snapped. "She's stealing from me," Caleb yelled. "Everything in that house is mine." I stepped forward, my voice calm and quiet. Caleb, I didn't steal anything. I just did what you did. I moved on. I thought you'd be happy. You wanted a fresh start, right? Well, look around. You've got one. You don't have a single tie left to this property or to me. Where's my mother? He suddenly asked, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. She's at the funeral home, Caleb, I said. She died 2 days ago. She asked for you, but you were busy, weren't you? The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Even the police looked at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. At that moment, Caleb wasn't a victim of a crazy wife. He was a man who had abandoned his dying mother and was now screaming about a gaming computer. Caleb wasn't arrested that day, not for the theft, at least. The police said the financial stuff was a civil matter that would take months to untangle. They told him he had to leave the property. He tried to argue, but since his name wasn't on the deed and I had a formal no trespass order already printed and ready, they forced him back into his silver SUV. He left with nothing but the clothes on his back and the car he was driving. But the revenge wasn't in the police. It wasn't in the money. It was in the gift I left for him. You see, Caleb had a very specific dream. He wanted to be a high-value man. He wanted his Instagram to show his luxury life. 2 weeks later, I watched from a fake account as he tried to post his first comeback video from the city. He was in his new apartment, a tiny, cramped studio he could barely afford because I had frozen our joint accounts. He sat down to show off his vintage watch collection to his followers. He opened the first box. He wound the watch. Nothing. He opened the second. Nothing. He went to his car, the silver SUV, which he had actually leased in my name using a forged signature. I didn't report it stolen. I did something better. I called the leasing company and told them I was surrendering the vehicle due to financial hardship and gave them his exact GPS location. While he was filming a motivational video in the parking lot of a gym, the repo truck pulled up behind him. The entire thing was captured on his own camera. The high-value man was left standing in a parking lot, holding a gimbal and a dead watch, watching his last piece of status being towed away. But here is the surprise, the thing that no one saw coming. About a month later, I was cleaning out the attic of the farmhouse. I found an old, locked trunk that belonged to Martha. I had the key. Inside weren't jewels or money. There were letters. They were letters from Caleb's biological father, the man Caleb claimed had died when he was a baby. The man he used, as a sob story, to get me to feel sorry for him. The letters were dated as recently as last year. His father wasn't dead. He was alive, living 3 towns over, and he had been sending Caleb money for years to help with Brenda and the house. Caleb had been double-dipping. He was taking support from his father while telling me he was an orphan. I didn't send the letters to Caleb. I didn't call him. Instead, I drove to the address on the envelopes. I met a kind, silver-haired man named Arthur. I told him everything. I told him how Caleb had treated Martha. I told him how Caleb had abandoned us on Thanksgiving. Arthur sat on his porch and cried. Then he looked at me and said, "I've been sending that boy $500 a month for 10 years. I thought I was helping him build a life with a woman he loved. Arthur stopped the checks. Caleb lost his secret income. He lost his car. He lost his stuff. He lost his reputation. I stayed in my farmhouse. The garden is quiet now. I didn't sell the Mustang. I had a mechanic friend come over and put the engine back together properly. I don't drive it much. Most days, it just sits in the driveway, a shimmering piece of metal that reminds me of the cost of a lie. I'm not a nurse anymore. I'm a woman who knows the value of her own time. Caleb still sends me emails sometimes, long, rambling pleas for fairness. I don't read them. I just hit delete. Because the ledger isn't just empty, the book is closed. I didn't just survive his abandonment. I turned his exit into my grand opening. If you've ever been the one left behind to do the hard work while someone else took the credit, know this. The person who holds the light at the end of the tunnel is the one who decides when to turn it off. Thank you for being part of our community today. If this story reminded you that you are worth more than someone's convenience, hit that like button and subscribe. Don't let anyone turn your sanctuary into their storage unit. Until next time, stay sharp and keep your receipts. Would you like me to share more stories of people who found their strength in the middle of a betrayal?